The doctors begged my wife to come because I had suffered a massive heart attack at work. Instead of rushing to the hospital, she calmly said their vacation had been planned for months and could not be cancelled. 5 days later, she came back expecting to continue life as usual. Instead, she walked into a silence that changed her life forever. She thought she had abandoned a dying husband. She had no idea I had survived ... and spent those 5 days uncovering a betrayal far worse than the heart attack itself. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sharp pain crushing my chest while I sat behind my office desk. Within seconds, my coworkers were calling an ambulance, and the emergency doctors were fighting to keep me alive. They immediately contacted my wife because they believed I might not survive the next few hours. Instead of rushing to the hospital, she calmly replied that our vacation had been planned for months and could not be cancelled. Even after the doctor warned that I could die before sunset, she boarded the flight anyway. 5 days later, she returned expecting life to continue as normal, but she had no idea those 5 days had changed everything forever. My name is Daniel, and at 56 years old, I believed I had built the kind of life most people dream about. I had spent nearly 3 decades working as a financial consultant, often sacrificing weekends, holidays, and countless family dinners to provide a comfortable future for my wife, Melissa, and our 2 children. We owned a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, drove reliable cars, and never worried about paying bills. Looking from the outside, anyone would have called us the perfect family. The truth, however, was that appearances can hide cracks that grow deeper every year without anyone noticing until the entire foundation begins to collapse. For years, I convinced myself that Melissa had simply become distant because life changes people over time. The warmth she once showed me slowly disappeared and was replaced with constant impatience. Small conversations often turned into arguments, and every disagreement somehow became my fault. Whenever I tried to spend quality time together, she reminded me how busy she was planning social events, shopping trips, or vacations with friends. I ignored the warning signs because I believed long marriages naturally went through difficult seasons. I kept telling myself that if I worked harder and loved her more, eventually everything would return to the way it used to be. The only people who seemed to notice the growing distance between us were our children. Our daughter Emily occasionally asked whether everything was all right at home because she sensed tension every time she visited. My son Ryan once quietly suggested that I deserved better than being treated like an inconvenience inside my own house. I always defended Melissa because I did not want my children choosing sides. I believed protecting our family meant keeping painful truths hidden, even if it required pretending that nothing was wrong. Looking back now, I realize silence often protects the person causing the damage instead of the person suffering from it. About 6 months before my heart attack, Melissa became unusually interested in expensive vacations. She spent hours researching luxury resorts, insisting that after all my years of hard work we deserved something unforgettable. I agreed because I genuinely wanted us to reconnect. She booked an exclusive 5-day getaway that cost more than we had ever spent on a vacation before. Although the price surprised me, I trusted her judgment completely. I never imagined that the trip she worked so hard to protect would become the very reason our marriage could never be saved. The morning everything changed started like any other workday. I arrived at the office before sunrise, reviewed client reports, and prepared for an important meeting scheduled later that afternoon. Around 10 o'clock, I noticed a strange tightness spreading across my chest. At first, I blamed stress and drank a glass of water, hoping the discomfort would pass. Instead, the pain became unbearable within minutes, shooting through my shoulder and making it difficult to breathe. My vision blurred as I collapsed onto the office floor, surrounded by terrified coworkers desperately calling emergency services while someone tried to keep me conscious until the ambulance arrived. Inside the ambulance, I drifted in and out of awareness while paramedics worked frantically around me. One of them kept repeating that every second mattered because the signs pointed to a severe heart attack. At the hospital, doctors rushed me directly into the cardiac unit without wasting a moment. Before beginning emergency treatment, one physician instructed a nurse to contact my wife immediately. They explained that my condition was extremely serious and that she needed to come to the hospital as quickly as possible. None of us expected the answer she would give only minutes later. The nurse returned looking visibly uncomfortable before quietly handing the phone to the senior cardiologist. I could not hear every word because medication was already affecting my senses, but one sentence reached me clearly enough to remember forever. The doctor firmly explained that her husband might not survive the day and that she should come immediately. After several moments of silence, his expression slowly changed from concern to disbelief. He ended the call, looked toward the medical staff, and softly said that my wife refused to come because she did not want to cancel the vacation she had spent months planning. When I regained full consciousness nearly 24 hours later, the room was filled with the steady rhythm of heart monitors and the quiet footsteps of nurses checking my condition. My chest felt heavy, every breath reminded me how close I had come to dying, and the first question that escaped my lips was whether my wife had arrived. The nurse hesitated before gently explaining that no family member had visited yet. My daughter Emily had called several times after learning about my condition, but my wife had not contacted the hospital once since the original phone call. That silence hurt far more than the pain spreading across my body. Emily arrived later that afternoon with tears streaming down her face. She rushed to my bedside, held my hand, and apologized over and over for not reaching the hospital sooner because she lived several hours away. Ryan arrived shortly after, his face filled with anger instead of sadness. He quietly asked whether their mother had come while they were driving. I simply shook my head. Neither of them spoke for several moments because the answer confirmed what they had secretly feared for years. The woman who had promised to stand beside me during sickness had chosen comfort over compassion when I needed her most. The cardiologist entered the room after my children stepped outside for coffee. He explained that I had survived because my coworkers reacted quickly and emergency treatment began within the critical window. Another 30 minutes without medical care might have produced a very different outcome. Before leaving, he gently asked whether there was someone trustworthy who could help manage my personal affairs while I recovered. My wife was still unavailable, and several important medical documents required immediate signatures. Hearing a doctor ask that question forced me to face a painful reality I had spent years refusing to acknowledge. Ryan handled the paperwork while Emily remained beside me throughout the evening. Watching my children care for me with such genuine love made me realize how much responsibility they had quietly carried inside our family. They had protected my feelings for years by pretending not to notice the growing distance between their mother and me. That evening, Ryan finally admitted he had seen Melissa acting unusually secretive for months. She frequently stepped outside to answer phone calls, changed the passwords on her devices, and became defensive whenever anyone asked simple questions. Until then, he had kept those observations to himself because he hoped he was imagining things. His words echoed in my mind long after everyone left for the night. At first, I tried convincing myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Stress, changing priorities, and busy schedules could make people behave differently. Yet another thought refused to disappear. If Melissa truly believed our marriage still mattered, why had she ignored a doctor telling her I might die before the end of the day? That single decision shattered every excuse I had created over the years. For the first time, I stopped defending her actions and began looking at them exactly as they were. The following morning, I asked Ryan to bring my laptop from home because several work files needed attention. While organizing documents, I noticed something unusual in our joint financial account. Over the previous 4 months, several large transfers had been made to a separate account I did not recognize. The amounts were carefully spaced apart, making them appear ordinary unless someone reviewed the complete history. Together, they totaled nearly $70,000. I stared at the screen in disbelief because I had never approved those transfers, and Melissa had never mentioned them. At first, I wondered whether she had invested the money somewhere, but none of our financial records showed any legitimate investment. Years of working in finance had trained me to recognize suspicious patterns, and these transactions immediately felt wrong. I contacted the bank and requested additional information. Because the account was jointly owned, they agreed to provide transaction records once proper verification was completed. The representative politely informed me that several more transfers had already been scheduled for the following week. If I had remained unconscious much longer, even more money would have quietly disappeared. That discovery completely changed my focus. Surviving the heart attack was no longer the only battle waiting for me. While I had been fighting for my life inside a hospital bed, someone had been emptying the savings I spent decades building. I immediately froze every joint account, suspended several automatic payments, and contacted my attorney, whom I had known for nearly 20 years. After listening carefully, he advised me not to confront Melissa until every financial record had been collected. Acting too early could give her enough time to hide evidence before the truth came to light. Later that afternoon, my attorney visited the hospital carrying a notebook filled with questions. As we reviewed the transactions together, he quietly pointed out something I had completely overlooked. Every large transfer had occurred within 24 hours of Melissa claiming she was meeting friends for shopping trips or planning our luxury vacation. The timing was too consistent to ignore. He recommended hiring a licensed private investigator to determine where the money had gone and whether anyone else was involved. Hearing those words made my stomach tighten because deep inside I already feared what the investigation might uncover. Before leaving, my attorney looked directly at me and offered one final piece of advice. He said surviving a heart attack had given me something many people never receive, a second chance to discover the truth before it was too late. Whether that truth involved financial fraud, betrayal, or something even worse, we would face it with evidence instead of emotion. As the hospital room grew quiet again, my phone vibrated with a notification. It was a cheerful vacation photo Melissa had just posted online, smiling beside the ocean with the caption saying that life was too short not to enjoy every moment. Looking at that picture while wearing heart monitor wires was the moment I realized my marriage had already ended. My only remaining question was how many secrets were still waiting to be uncovered. The private investigator wasted no time. Within 48 hours he began following every lead connected to the unknown bank account and the recent transactions. Because Melissa believed I was still recovering quietly in the hospital, she had no reason to suspect anyone was watching her. That false sense of security became her biggest mistake. While she continued posting cheerful vacation photos online, the investigator documented every financial record, every phone contact, and every meeting that took place after her return. I expected to uncover careless spending or hidden debt. I never imagined the betrayal reached much deeper than money. 3 days later, the investigator arrived at my hospital room carrying a thick envelope. He placed several photographs on the small table beside my bed before saying a single word. My heart sank as I looked at the images. Melissa was meeting the same man repeatedly over several months at restaurants, hotels, and private apartments. The investigator explained that the man was not a coworker or a family friend. He was someone she had been secretly involved with for almost a year. Worse still, the money transferred from our joint account had been helping pay his business debts and luxury lifestyle. Every dollar represented years of overtime, missed holidays, and sacrifices I had made believing I was protecting my family. I felt anger rising inside me, but my attorney immediately reminded me that emotion could destroy everything we had worked to uncover. Instead of confronting Melissa, we continued gathering evidence. Phone records showed hundreds of late-night conversations. Financial documents revealed that she had planned several expensive trips using our savings while telling me they were discounted vacation packages. The investigator even recovered messages discussing what would happen if my health continued to decline. Reading those conversations was more painful than the heart attack itself because they proved my suffering had become an opportunity instead of a tragedy. By the end of the week, every piece of evidence had been organized into a detailed report. My attorney quietly smiled for the first time since meeting me in the hospital. He explained that the documentation was overwhelming. Between the unauthorized financial transfers, hidden accounts, and misuse of marital assets, Melissa had left a clear trail that could not be explained away. We immediately filed for divorce, requested emergency financial protection, and arranged for every important asset to be legally secured before she realized what had happened. She still believed she controlled the situation. She had no idea the entire game had already changed. 5 days after my heart attack, I was finally discharged from the hospital. Instead of returning directly home, I spent several hours meeting with my attorney and transferring ownership of personal accounts into secure legal protection. My children stood beside me through every signature and every difficult decision. Neither of them encouraged revenge. They simply wanted justice and peace after watching our family slowly fall apart for years. Their strength reminded me that true family is measured by loyalty during the hardest moments, not by appearances during the easiest ones. That evening, Melissa finally returned from vacation. She walked through the front door carrying shopping bags and souvenirs, expecting sympathy because she claimed traveling had been emotionally exhausting. The smile disappeared from her face the moment she noticed several neatly organized boxes sitting in the living room. On top rested an envelope with her name written across the front. Inside were divorce papers, copies of the financial investigation, photographs from the private investigator, and a handwritten letter explaining that I had survived both the heart attack and her betrayal. For several minutes the house remained completely silent except for the sound of papers trembling in her hands. She immediately began calling my phone again and again, leaving emotional messages insisting everything was a misunderstanding. She claimed the money had only been temporary loans, the photographs lacked context, and the messages were meaningless conversations taken out of context. None of those explanations mattered anymore because every statement could be disproved by documented evidence. For years I had accepted apologies without asking difficult questions. This time I trusted facts instead of promises. The marriage had not ended because of one mistake. It ended because countless deliberate choices finally came into the light. Several weeks later, the divorce proceedings moved quickly. The court reviewed the financial evidence, unauthorized transfers, and documented misuse of shared assets. Much of the money was successfully recovered through legal action, while the remaining losses became part of the settlement. Melissa soon discovered that the man she had sacrificed her family for disappeared as soon as the money stopped flowing. Friends who once admired her luxury lifestyle quietly disappeared as well. The exciting future she believed she was building collapsed almost overnight because it had been constructed on dishonesty from the very beginning. As for me, recovery was slow but meaningful. Cardiac rehabilitation strengthened my body one day at a time, while my children helped rebuild the confidence I had nearly lost. We began having family dinners again, laughing about old memories instead of pretending everything was fine. My heart attack had nearly ended my life, yet it also removed every illusion that had kept me trapped inside an unhappy marriage. Sometimes survival is more than staying alive. Sometimes it means finding the courage to walk away from people who stopped valuing your life long before you realized it. Today I no longer measure wealth by the size of a house or the balance inside a bank account. Real wealth is waking up surrounded by people who would never choose a vacation over your heartbeat. Looking back, I understand that my heart attack was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a life built on honesty, respect, and peace. Karma did not arrive through revenge or anger. It arrived through truth. In the end, the woman who abandoned me during the darkest day of my life lost the one thing she could never buy back: the trust of the family that once loved her without conditions. As my wife stood inside the empty house holding the divorce papers, she finally understood that losing money was never the real punishment. The greatest loss was the family she had taken for granted. She had chosen a vacation over the man who spent 27 years protecting her. She chose convenience over compassion, and by the time she realized the price of that decision, forgiveness was no longer waiting for her. Months later, I moved into a smaller home surrounded by the people who had actually stood beside me during the darkest week of my life. My health slowly improved. My relationship with my children became stronger than ever, and for the first time in years, I felt genuine peace. My heart attack nearly ended my life, but it also revealed every lie hiding inside my marriage. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the day that finally sets you free.